Welcome to Becoming an Ayn Rand Hero podcast. I'm Mark Michael Lewis, the profitability coach. And on the Becoming an Ayn Rand Hero podcast, we work on applying the ideas of Ayn Rand's work to real life so that we can get real thriving for ourselves and for others and for the society that we're a part of. And this particular episode is part of the Integral Ayn Rand series because I'm speaking with Michael Porcelli, who I know through contexts around authenticity and integral work in Ken Wilber. And so I wanted to include some of the integral ideas of Ken Wilber in our conversation today so we could talk about who is Ayn Rand and how does she fit into a life of authenticity, of success, of meaning, of purpose, of community. And I'll have Michael describe his work in just a moment. But what I'll say is Michael does business consulting, especially a fascinating business model called Holocracy. And he does personal and business coaching, as well as helping to run some international seminars on authenticity and integral. Very interesting guy, and I'm looking forward to this conversation about Ayn Rand. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, Mark. It's good to see you. It's good to talk to you again. It's been a while.
Yeah. So how do you describe your work, what you're up to, so that people have a sense for who you is?
Wow. Everything to me centers around like an authentic expression and authentic direction. That's working with individuals, helping them just uncover what's really true for themselves in terms of communication or in terms of career, and doing something that's more fulfilling for them in terms of their career. And what I do here at the Integral Center, in addition to working behind the scenes to make this a successful business, I help lead and design curriculum for helping people like express themselves interpersonally with more authenticity and clarity, and owning their desires and taking responsibility for themselves and for their lives. So that's a small sampling there. I mean, with Holocracy, that's another aspect of my work that we do here at the Integral Center. We use Holocracy, and in that system, it really encourages people to take responsibility for the roles that they've been given, or to find a way to renegotiate what those roles are and what those expectations are. So this trend of collaboration and peer-to-peer sharing economy, these systems work only when people are really taking personal and individual responsibility for what they've agreed to do. Otherwise, it just dissolves into chaos. So it's pretty cutting edge kind of thing, and I'm excited about a lot of businesses adopting this kind of paradigm. Holocracy is just a really good example of this emerging way of doing work that I'm excited about.
Yes. So it's fun. Becoming an Ayn Rand hero, you could say this idea looks at Ayn Rand's work and says there's 5 major principles or 5 major traits of the Ayn Rand hero. Right? The first is reality, right? You deal with reality as it is, right? And you look to understand reality as it is, so you work with it, right? The second is reason, right? You approach it critically, using your best intelligence to try to understand it, to make sense of it, to take multiple perspectives on it so you can really find out what it is, right? So use reason to get to reality.
Yeah.
Right. Third principle is responsibility. Right? It's to recognize that you are the chooser in your life.
Yep.
Right? You're the one who says, I want to do this, and then you do it. And when you live with responsibility, that's how you create the life that you want to live. Right?
Yeah.
You could say, take responsibility to use reason to deal with reality. Right?
I like it.
And then the fourth is respect. Right? It's interpersonal. It relates to politics. Right? It's about, so how do you work with other people? Collaborate. How do you collaborate? How do you partner with others? Right? And the more responsibility you take, the more you can partner with others, the more you can demonstrate respect and find wins. And those four all lead to realization, the discovery of creativity and innovation and what's possible. So I find it appropriate from my perspective that you say, well, we deal with reality, right? Authenticity, really finding what's true for you,
Yeah.
right? And then
Hmm.
take responsibility so that you can collaborate with others. So it's like you just start off, hitting three of the five keys of
Nice.
of the Iron Man Hero,
And I didn't
right?
even know that this was your model.
Yes, I know. I know. It's it. So when you're keyed into something that's truly valuable, you find echoes of it everywhere, as
Yeah.
you know. So to get into it, because I want to talk about holocracy and what you're doing with Integral and what you do in your practice called authentic direction. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. My coaching practice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like how it is that you do that. But to start off in the Ayn Rand context, what's your relationship with Ayn Rand? How did you get involved with her? How into her are you? That kind of stuff. Just to set some context.
Yeah. I think in my college years was the first time I was exposed to her, but mainly in a negative, critical light, as though she's some kind of shill for greed and corporatism and this type of thing. And it was easy just to kind of go with the crowd and judge her in that way. And then as I became more familiar with her work, I mean, I could see some validity to what was being criticized, but it seemed like there was something more profound and interesting that she was trying to communicate, which I kind of liked. I mean, I would say I'm not like a super fan of hers. Like it feels like a little bit of a mixed bag sometimes when I read her stuff. But I am fascinated with her ability to convey these concepts through what to me is this and kind of an entertaining and attention kind of drawing way. Like ended up reading The Fountainhead. I haven't read Atlas Shrugged yet.
Mhm.
And then I also heard a big long interview with Nathaniel Brandon, who I think recently passed in this past year, who was her life partner for some time, and Ken Wilber. And they talked together on a really extended interview that I found fascinating window into Ain's personal life. So that about summarizes my familiarity with her. Like Atlas Shrugged is still on my list of things to read. I have a big list of things to read.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone who's read the book, 20 plus times and stuff, it's my favorite book, pretty much in the world, really.
Wow.
There's a lot of parts to it. When you get to it, I think you'll find it fascinating. When you read it, give me a
Cool.
call.
I
Totally
will.
talk about it.
Sure.
That would be great fun. So in terms of you mentioned that she's sort of a mixed bag,
Yeah.
right? That there are parts of her that you like the way she talks about things or what you get from her. Because I understand you're not a scholar of her work,
No.
right? What you
No.
have is you have a series of impressions that have come from reading her and talking about her and hearing conversations about her,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which I think is how it is for most normal people,
Hmm.
right? Some freaks like me like really get into it and study it a lot. But so in terms of a mixed bag, there are some things that you like about what she represents to you. Like if you think about, okay, well, what's good about Ayn Rand from your perspective? What's a takeaway or what's something that you say? Well, I like this about what I think she is. You know?
Hmm. Well, the thing that I would say, I think it's your responsibility. Are I think it's an easy trap to fall into what I call a victim mentality, where there's a view that we're at effect by these larger forces. You could look at it from an individual, like psychological development and what my parents did to me and that sort of thing, or larger social forces like racism and sexism and capitalism and the media and that kind of social programming, and it is just kind of the classic, like, the devil made me do it kind of mentality. Like, and while I do think, in integral terms, I think that it's that the what Ken Wilber calls the green meme, where we recognize that there actually are these forces that are at work and do affect our lives in ways that we didn't choose. Like, we kind of were born into them. But that is not, in the end, I think, not an excuse for just chalking it up to, like, oh, I get to, just play a victim, through my adult life, kind of staying in a childlike relationship with reality. Like, well, sometimes it's just going to be tough, or sometimes people are just not going to let you do the thing that you want, or shit is just not going to be fair, or whatever. And while that's kind of true, it still remains like, what do you do about that? Like, let's say all that is true. Like, there is the meaning that you give to that. And I think that is the thing that she, like, from so many different angles, like, in her stories and in her philosophy, that my understanding of it as a
Yeah.
non-expert is that she's talking about. She's talking about, like, and now what do you do about that? Like, you are responsible for your life. It's not like somebody else is responsible for it. And in the face of all these larger forces, like, what do you choose to do with what you've been given? And that, to me, is what I like about what I think about her.
Yeah. 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 I like that. It's one of the metaphors I like to use with my clients. Right. One of the things I like to establish with all of my clients is that right now, like, the worst that you've got it is probably better than a 15th century nobleman.
Yes, totally.
Right? Like, even just going back 100 years, right? The choices that you have, as screwed up as it is, as as unfair as the system is, discrimination, and as subtle as the media is, and how it gets into your narratives and affects your consciousness and all of that. In the face of all of that, the choices that we have are just huge. And the question is not what you can't do, because there's always an infinite number of things that you can't do.
True.
Right? The question is, what can you do, and taking responsibility for that. And that's one of the things that you, right, to take responsibility, to not take the position of a victim
Right.
and expect the world to change and demand that the world change.
Right.
But
Like, wait for it. Yeah. To change.
and complain about it
And complain. Right.
and build your identity around the fact that you're better at complaining about how that thing is screwed up than something else.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's I think that's fair. And in terms of the other, you could say the other side of the mixed bag, right? The parts of Ayn Rand's philosophy, or again, your experience of it, since you're not an expert, like what you're left with having dealt with that. Do you see any downsides to it, or?
Uh, it's just sometimes she's like, I don't know if it's like some YouTube video clip of her, or what's in my memory here, but she seems a little grouchy, like a little like like this kind of bone to pick with this collectivism shit. And like, I'm like, well, if people want to voluntarily create some kind of collaborative, like, system, then more power to them. And I don't think she's necessarily against it. It's just at moments she just seems to be just like almost like no version of, like, cooperating is, like, good. And it just sort of sounds like a little grouchy and one-sided, and I don't know if that's really the most profound thing she's had to say, but maybe sometimes it seems like in an off day, or certain times when I read it, I'm just sort of struck with a little disappointment that she sees this responsibility thing, like, so narrowly, or what seems like a narrow version of it. But yeah, like, it's something like that. is where I'd say.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. As someone who takes great joy and pride in trying to make the best of what I got, right? Trying to make the best of experience, being grouchy and not such a good thing. And another thing, I'll say down that road, she can be extraordinarily judgmental,
Hmm.
right? And strident,
Yes.
right? Now, like in the particular context she's talking about, just to clarify, she's completely cool with people voluntarily getting into collectives, and if that's what they want to do, great, right? She's totally into that, right? Her whole thing is voluntary,
Yeah.
right? That's one of the reasons she loves business is that it's trade,
Right.
right?
Voluntary exchange.
Right, voluntary exchange. She's very much against using force to get people to take from Peter to pay Paul.
Coercion.
Right, coercion. She's completely against that, and that's her bone with collectivism. Is not that people want to get together in groups. You haven't read Atlas Shrugged, but you could say a lot of the plot of the novel is a whole bunch of people getting together into a voluntary group, right?
Okay.
Where they,
Cool.
where they support one another in the ways that they want to, right? So
Yeah.
so it's certainly not that, but using force to have people join the collective that you think that they should be in
Right.
is what she's against. And in that, she can be vituperative, just like, that's evil. These people are irrational.
Hmm.
And in that, what I want to agree with you about is that she can be grouchy.
Hmm.
And, even if she's right, she can be a jerk about it.
Yeah. She doesn't exactly win people over necessarily
Right, right.
very
Now,
well.
if you're dealing with people who are going to use force against you if they disagree, I think
Yeah.
that's probably appropriate, right? And I don't know if you know, she came from Soviet Russia. She actually
I did know
escaped. So
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
she escaped Soviet Russia. So she lived in St. Petersburg before the communists took over,
And
and
became
she
what,
watched.
Stalingrad or something.
Yeah. It was St. Petersburg. Yeah, and Stalin. So and then so she watched the city get transformed into a totalitarian state built on propaganda,
Mm-hmm.
right? And she didn't like it, so she left, and she essentially set her life on exposing that and critiquing
Yep.
that. Right. So I can understand her stridency to a degree
Yeah.
because millions of people died, and she watched what happened.
Yeah.
But I agree that's probably not so much. So um, to continue kind of down that line in terms of the responsibility
Mm-hmm.
and cooperation, the voluntary versus coercion,
Mm-hmm.
right? To bring that into the realm of holocracy, which is the business organization or one of the business organization paradigms, where it's
Mm-hmm.
an actual system that you consult on, that you help people
Mm-hmm.
implement, that you're helping to implement at the Integral Center,
Yes.
right? How does responsibility and coercion versus voluntary relationships, how does that fit into that particular business paradigm?
Wow. There's so much there. I'd say the first thing that it does, which is often surprising to people, because I think a lot of times there's this idea of like new cutting edge business models that is, hey, there are no titles, there's no authority, and people can do whatever they want to do. And uh, in holacracy, like it's almost the opposite. There's like a lot of precision about the process, and there's a lot of specificity in terms of who does what and where authority is empowered and where authority is limited. And that particular specificity actually helps people negotiate work in a way where there's less politicking and less like turf war type of things. And the truth is, it doesn't have the traditional hierarchical top-down structure of a business where essentially, like, if you don't have the authority to make a certain decision, or you don't feel empowered to, or whatever, you're afraid to, you kick it up one level, and it keeps getting kicked up until you get up to the CEO level, and every once in a while it goes all the way to the board level. But like in Holocracy, instead of that, you look up the record of what the current roles and responsibilities and expectations and limitations on the responsibilities and power are, and then you just route it right to that person. So you don't have to route things through a hierarchical channel. It's like a peer channel, but it's documented very explicitly. When there's something missing, if you have a sense, oh, there's something missing here, or I don't like the way that it's currently defined, instead of being like, oh, well, who's the boss that I go to tell, hey, I want you to tell this other person what their responsibilities are. Instead, you go to a process. So there's like a regularly recurring event that's called a governance meeting. It's just a regular meeting for each of the teams. And then you go to that meeting and you just make the proposal in a certain specified format for the change that you would want to have. And there's a very well-defined process by which any objections or any modifications to the proposal that the team wants to have, like, can be added or modified to that. So in a way, you can't complain that nobody's listening to you. Like, if it's like, well, if you have this kind of complaint about the way things are being done, you go with your idea to this particular meeting and see what happens. Like, and the facilitator makes sure everyone plays by the rules of the game in terms of how the process goes. It's a little bit like a kind of a parliamentary procedure of a sort, but yeah, that's basically how you got to do it.
Yeah. Part of what I hear in that is that you take a normal hierarchical structure in which people have positions of power, and they kind of delegate responsibilities according to how they're doing it. And if you want to change anything, if there's any part in the system that you want to change, your basic only route is to go to the person of power and ask them a favor,
Right.
right? To make a
Listen to
request.
me.
And
Yeah.
then they, rather than taking that responsibility, can kick it upstairs. And if you want to go to someone who's a peer to you, you have to go up and over and down and hope that through the translation it works, right?
Yeah.
So in a sense, your responsibility is very small. If you sense that something's there, you only have that much power. You only have that much responsibility. The only thing you can do is kick it upstairs. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
Right?
little bit like, brother and sister or something, and you just go to like mom or dad and be like, hey, can you just tell him to share the toy, please? Like that.
Right. Right. And in the holocracy model, right? Instead of having, you could say, power positions, you have roles and you have well-defined teams. And so if there's something that you want to do, you can go anywhere in the organization to the people who have the role.
Correct.
Right? So in a sense, you're taking away the hierarchy without taking away the well-defined roles.
Exactly. Yeah. More or less, you got it.
Right? And in that, it means that you have to have a different kind of relationship with the people that you're working with. Instead of being, aha, do this because boss tells you to, right? So I want you to do this, so I'm going to get a boss to tell you to. So it's power,
Right.
right? Your relationship now becomes one of voluntary, right? The unforced force of the better argument, where it's like persuasion and logic and putting it in the business case. Okay, here's the reason why we want to do this.
Yes.
And each person is empowered to make that happen. And there are structures in place in order to make that into a game that people know the rules and they can play by those rules.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
right? The thing I notice about that is that increases your responsibility dramatically.
Yes.
Because now you can't just kick it upstairs. It's like if you want something to change, you actually have to go figure out what people are doing, figure out the role structures, make proposals, get agreement, and then, right? So you become, as you take away the hierarchy
Yeah.
and put it into a relationship of equals, of peers, your
Yes.
responsibility grows.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And some people don't like that. Like it's kind of interesting. I think in some cases people will uh, miss or wish they could have the old way back in some way. I mean, it reminds me. I mean, there's like an analog, I think, in how people relate to the state. Like people, it's like, well, I can't trust these people to take care of it. I just want to appeal to the people, who basically have the guns and can just go make the other person do the thing, right? Like
Huh?
there's people sometimes don't the having that amount of responsibility challenges them, and they either back down from it or they grow into it. For people who aren't quite ready for that type of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And again, from an Ayn Rand perspective, and the Ayn Rand hero, right? The idea of the Ayn Rand hero is that there are characters in Ayn Rand's novels who are admirable,
Mm-hmm.
right? They represent humanity at kind of in peak experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're doing things really well. They're really on track of their creativity, and Ayn Rand heroes would love that kind of organization. They would
I agree.
love the holocratic organization because look, no, let's if there's something to be done, do it. Go find the people who need to do it, right? Partner with them, build the partnership, and then do it. And we don't want to have a state. We don't want to have some overarching authority that we have to like appeal to and who can say no to us and use force to stop us. When we see that that's what needs to be done, we agree it needs to be done, we're just going to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Cool. Cool. Nice. By the way, that's a really concise little dialogue we just had around what I understand holocracy to be. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And I don't want to speak on behalf of uh, the folks at Holocracy One, but I have the impression that they like Rand in some ways, or at least some of them do. I don't know exactly who, but
Yeah.
I get the
I ought
sense
to,
by
I ought to,
analogy
I ought
they're
to
saying.
interview Brian.
Yeah, get Brian on the line and see what he has to say. That would be very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, so as you take that and bring it into an integral context,
Hmm.
right? How do you understand responsibility and the peer relationship? You could say both in terms of how that fits into an integral theory and how it fits into, integral center and the authenticity work that you guys do.
Man,
Again, these very small, bite-sized questions for you.
yeah. Well, I think, um, I mean, at Integral Center, our work centers around relating and relationships and communication. And uh, we use these terms often. We talk about agency and communion. And on the agency side is really uh, focused on, from your point of view, like your individual will and choice and responsibility. Sometimes we use the word dignity, like the dignity of my own perspective, is not without good reason. Whatever the larger forces might be, like my own perspective, even though it might be partial or limited, has in itself a good reason to be and deserving of respect and acknowledgement and welcoming and appreciating. So this is kind of the agency, uh, more self-oriented, individual-oriented side. And then the other one is communion, which is orienting towards, you might say, the collective or the community, or orienting towards the people that you care about, the people that you're partnering with in a business relationship, partnering with in a family relationship. And I think that at the heart of what we teach is like they go hand in hand. I think there's kind of errors in both directions. Like if you get more in this really self-oriented way, you kind of start seeing people as means to an end, or I could coerce and force people to bend to my will when I want to, just because I can do it. You know, I can make them, and there's a loss when you swing too far that way. And I think this is kind of where Ayn Rand gets criticized. Is like, you know, the impression in the public is she's too far in that direction.
Like as far as you can go in that direction that makes it absolutely ugly, that's
Yes,
her.
that's her, right?
That's the caricature of her.
Yes, of her,
Yes.
totally.
Yes.
And then in the other direction, I think there's this the thing that she was really standing up to, I think, was the error in the other direction, like where the collective is more valued, or the group is more valued, or other is more valued. And in your personal relationships, this might look like, you know, being a doormat, or pandering, or acquiescing constantly, or constantly just like, well, I don't know what I want, but I'll do whatever you want, because there's some weird indebtedness maybe that you're secretly doing inside, or unconsciously doing, like, and that also can be really damaging to relationships. And people don't know where you stand. You can open yourself up to being fairly manipulated fairly easily. People won't really invite you to be a contributor, because you know, you sort of show up and you're not having any original contributions to make.
There ain't no there. There's
There's
no.
nothing there.
I ain't bringing anybody, so there's nothing for me to contribute other than to be an echo chamber.
Exactly. So, you know, in our relationship work, I think what we talk about is like to actually have a healthy group, or a healthy community, a healthy business partnership, or a family partnership. Like, you got to have, the agency has to be there. It's like, you know, and I think they play well both ways. But like, you know, we definitely recover this idea of like agency within relationship, or in order to have good communion, you have to have good agency. You know, because otherwise, if everybody's just sitting around going like, I don't know, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know, what do you want to do? And it's just
Or
everyone saying that.
or I'll try to bend myself to be who I think you want me to be, and then you'll think that that's who I really am, and so you'll react to that,
Uh-huh.
and right, right,
Yeah, and it's just this weird, in its worst form, it just turns into this kind of icky, sticky, like very inauthentic feeling, like everyone's just playing nice, or, you know, I mean, the worst is like everyone's trying to bend to what they think other people want, and you're trying to bend to what you think what I want, and like now we have these fake personas that are essentially just interacting with each other.
yeah. So in The Fountainhead, there was a
Uh-huh.
bad guy named Ellsworth Toohey. I don't know if you remember this, but he was a really bad guy, and in at the end of the book, he does a speech, and he is one of my favorite villains in all of literature.
Hmm.
Like he's a really profound villain,
Mm-hmm.
right? And one of the things he talks about is that that's the world he's going for, where everyone's trying to be the person that they think the other person wants them to be, and the other person is trying to be the person that they want them to be,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's just a whole series of nothing, which is great for the leaders who want to control them,
Right.
right? Right. You use so, but if you want to read Toohey's speech, it's that you would get a kick out of what you just said in terms of that and understanding the integral thing. But you use the word dignity,
Yeah.
which is such a powerful word. right? It's like the more dignity you bring of yourself to the community,
Mm-hmm.
right? The more you're there to contribute, right? There's
Absolutely.
more you there to contribute,
Yes.
right? And the more you respect the dignity of the other people, the more you call forth, the more you seek the dignity, the more you stand for the dignity of other people, the
Yes.
more you bring what they have to contribute,
Yes.
right? And the more bring dignity you bring, I like to say, the more you can recognize the dignity of other people. So it's
Mm-hmm.
by bringing your own dignity that you make the dignity of others possible,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you don't respect the dignity of others, right, I would say that's not dignified, right? The part of bringing your own dignity is recognizing the dignity of others. That you really can't have a self in community unless you recognize the self of the others.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, what you're talking about goes right to the heart of so our kind of homegrown process here is this thing called circling, which I know you've experienced at times in the past with us, and that is kind of at the heart of it. Like we bring ourselves in relationship, like our own individual dignity, and that thing you're talking about, like recognizing the dignity of others, we call it humility. And when a person is experiencing a circle, especially if they're called the circlee, they're the focus of this group of people, this facilitated conversation. What usually ends up happening is that person feels something like, I just get to be who I am. I just get to share myself as I am. And you guys are basically being honest with me about what that's like. You're welcoming me as I am, and you're sharing with me honestly what it's like for you to be with me. And that experience, although it sometimes sounds so simple, or even like, aren't people just doing that all the time? Like, I don't think people are just doing that all the time. And I think when you really put attention on doing it, people's their own unique self gets cultivated and encouraged, and it's really a beautiful thing to see when people like get that for themselves. It's like, oh, like this one guy just recently said, I don't think anybody has really understood this part of me before, you guys. And I'm like, uh-huh. And it's like these weird secret lives that we live sometimes thinking, I couldn't possibly share that, or no one could possibly understand this. This is just my own weird way. And like in a circle, like when we welcome that and somebody brings it out and they get to like share it, and they now know that we know that about that, like there's some weird and really beautiful magical way that any kind of shame or self-judgment fall away, and that person's unique individuality comes out in a more clean, pure or direct way rather than in an indirect way.
Yeah, yeah. There's I again the fifth trait is realization,
Uh-huh.
the aesthetic, the opening, right, the
Yes.
discovery, and in that what you're describing. So it's like by taking responsibility, bringing dignity, respecting the dignity of others, and really getting into the reality of it, and creating a conversation, a space in which that can happen. It leads to the realization, and
Oh,
that's profound. It's simple,
totally.
but simplicity is not easy. Like
True.
simplicity is infinitely deep, and therefore the realization that's possible is infinitely huge.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it.
Cool. This is great. This is fun.
Great. Well, so thank you, Michael Porcelli. Uh, auth- authentic direction coaching,
AuthenticDirectionCoaching.com and
auth-
integralcenter.org. Yep.
integralcenter.org.
Mm.
So everybody, check out what Integral Center is doing. I'm going to be interviewing a lot of people from Integral Center because I'm a huge champion of their work, and I think I think it dovetails great with Ayn Rand. Just don't be a grouch and don't be a jerk.
And holocracy.org, I think, if you want to find out more about holocracy, the entire constitution and the whole process of how it works is on there, including some media and learning stuff.
Great. Great.
Cool.
Thank you, sir. Absolute pleasure.
Likewise, Mark.
Great. So this has been Becoming an Ayn Rand Hero, applying the ideas of Ayn Rand to your real life so you can get real results and live a life with qualities of an Ayn Rand hero. So thank you, Michael. Have a great day.
Welcome. You too.
Bye.